Will our next meeting be in person in Chambers?
It will, yes.
Excellent.
Our last Zoom meeting here today.
Sandra and Daniel, incidentally, I was talking with Mike Jordan.
Is that presumably going to get announced between now and the next meeting?
Yeah, so the council is going to make a decision at
Flag, United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about that. It sounds like my internet flaked right at that moment. I think I'm back. Does anyone have anything to add to the agenda today? If not, would someone make a motion to adopt the agenda?
I will make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Seconded.
Okay. And motion is adopted. We do have minutes this time. The minutes have been presented, so I would like to ask at this time if there are any changes to the minutes from previous meetings at this time.
I have a question. It seems like these minutes are very vague. Is that because, what is the importance of minutes now, written minutes, since we have video recorded meetings? Because these don't have much in them.
Our written minutes are action only items, so they'll only indicate the action rather than a discussion of the issues. and that's because the agenda video can be viewed online, and if somebody wants to do it, that's the main source.
Okay, so if it says like a motion was made with amendments, it doesn't need to include the amendments? Any more detail?
I would say that it does. I'm sorry I didn't see a copy of those minutes.
Okay.
I think that we can alter our minutes management system to start including more detail going forward.
It seems like it should include both the motion and any requested amendments.
Yes. So I'm
I
not,
agree. That's action that we want to capture.
yeah. Okay, I'm not comfortable approving the minutes then, as they're presented.
So
That I guess that needs to be a motion.
yes, would anyone offer a motion to adopt the meetings as minutes as presented? Guessing no motion was presented to adopt the meeting. So at this time, I suppose we could have a motion to send the minutes back for further detail and clarification specific to motions and amendments and actions taken.
I second that.
Okay. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. So motion was to revise the minutes as discussed. And of course, then these meeting minutes will reflect the amendment to adopt previous meeting minutes. At this time, is there any public comment before we get started on the agenda items?
No, there's no public comment.
Okay. I'll close the public comment period. And with that, let's proceed. We have 2 agenda items. We'll begin with the first item.
Is this the property on One Landy? Then I will need to recuse myself due to proximity. See you later.
Member Cook.
Give me 1 second, please. Okay, and at this time, I'll be letting in the applicants and sharing my screen. Please give me 1 moment. Okay.
Just as a matter of process, now that we have the applicants here, just a quick reminder, we'll try to adhere to the format where the staff will present the update. The members of the board will direct questions to staff specifically. It'll be very tempting to want to answer those questions directly, but just to try to reinforce protocol. And then after we go back and forth with staff, we'll shift our focus to Ivan and Ryan. So just, and then we can be fairly open and unstructured at that point. So welcome back and thank you. Go ahead, Daniel, thanks.
Okay, great. So tonight, the first item for the board's review is an item that was continued from a previous meeting in May, and that was the design review to demolish an existing 2-car garage, construct a 1-car garage, and install a pool at One Landy Way. At the previous meeting, the board expressed concerns that the pool plan was not clear and that they would like more clarity for the pool and its design, as well as to confirm the setbacks by a lot line survey. The applicant has provided updated materials with a clarified pool plan, as well as renderings, as well as the lot line survey confirming that the fence line is coterminous with the property line. In the revised plan set. They also show that they meet or adhere to all of the required setbacks for the garage and the pool. And so with that, I would turn it over to the board for discussion. Oh, and sorry, additionally, one last thing. At the last meeting of the town council, the configuration for tandem parking was approved.
So at this time, the specific questioning is really directed around various amendments to the pool. I'll pass it on to members of the board. If there are any questions, we'll get to the applicants in one second. Just want to make sure if there's any questions or for clarifications to staff from the board members.
I do feel it's important that the pool designer be on here. He's not, I don't see Daniel having him have it as a invite. And he was committed to being on here, just FYI. So it's hard to answer pool questions without him being included, just as a note.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say that I believe he was invited, but he has not appeared in the waiting room yet.
Sorry, Ryan, if you're...
Michael Chaffee is not on this invite list, just to be clear.
All right.
Happy to extend an invite now.
Well, at this point, let's proceed. If there are any specific questions or topics that would be best addressed by the pool designer, we can come up with a plan to proceed with that. But in the interest of time, we'll move forward. And again, yeah, Daniel, if Michael was expecting to be invited and didn't. Sorry, did I cut out again? Sorry about that, my internet connection. Any questions of staff from the members of the board?
I do.
Yes, member Pina.
Could you just reiterate the movement of the garage, and then because I do recall that there was some discussion about the garage being moved forward and then how it would block the existing kitchen window. And I can't quite remember what the good. That's a great picture. Thank you.
That's correct. So this is the existing layout. You can see the 2-car garage and that kitchen window. The next is a rendering of bringing that forward. They're proposing a single a door as well as a 1-car garage, and it does obscure that window.
Thank you. Thank you. And then there was some discussion of like a skylight or something, I believe, in the kitchen, or some kind of additional lighting. Was that ever talked about? It's not part of it. Anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah, that's not part of the application that I've seen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, member Pina. Any other questions of staff?
I have a question. So the tree that we're looking at in this photograph currently remains? There's no tree removal?
Correct. No tree removal has been proposed.
I'll assume no other questions at this time. Not sure if contact has been made with the pool designer, but we'll go ahead and pass it on to the applicant, who I believe is Ryan, who, if there's anything you wanted to add in addition to the staff notes, go ahead. Thank you. And I just need to unmute. Bottom left.
Sorry, I lost the Zoom file. I was trying to went through all sorts of windows. So just on that, the drawing I had discussed with Ivan, and Daniel, if you could please bring up the virtual Photoshopped rendering that we proposed originally with the concept. Can you share that?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I just closed it. Sorry.
That's okay. If you look at the actual drawing in the pool or the architectural elevation, we've decided to go to a 2-car garage opening instead of a single for aesthetic reasons, and moving the man door to the outside or to the inside of the courtyard. So that is a change that we did just to try to make it look better and have that 2-car garage entry. So that is on the design and what we're looking at on the pool and the current architectural rendering. So just to clarify. There you go. So that single man door, the left line of that door will essentially be the left line of the actual garage opening. And that man door will be on the inside where that tree is, essentially. So just to clarify that, I didn't go back and redo that with time, but it does reflect the correct image in the pool rendering as well as the architectural rendering that Ivan has provided.
Is it correct in the plans?
Yes. Daniel, if you may now, if you could please, if you want to reflect the vision of the plan to show that it's not a single door anymore, we're doing a double. Maybe a different image than that might be easier to see. Oh yeah, you can see it there too. Yeah. That's all. It's a larger opening, looks a little better. We were able to fit it in and move some things around. Aesthetically more pleasing, a little more room from the front as it were originally. So and instead of having 2 single doors, it's 1 large door, which matches the configuration with many houses on the street.
Ryan, the courtyard that now the new relocated man door enters off of is, I wouldn't necessarily characterize that as a courtyard, but rather a small space between the house and the garage. Yeah. And it has a tree in there, but the tree isn't shown on the plans. Is there a way that you can indicate where that tree is with regards to the rest of the plan?
So if we were to zoom in on that image there, that courtyard is a courtyard. It looks small in the picture, but if you can see the kitchen, it's about the same size as a kitchen, which you see in above. We're moving that bay window, so the bay window will have a view out that way since it'll be covered by the new garage area. And the actual tree that's there is directly in between the 2 windows that are shown in the design plan and very close to the wall. So the tree is about 1/3 in from the house wall into the courtyard, and then about dead center of it. Did I answer your question, or is there something else I could do to elaborate?
Well, I wish that we had a greater understanding of the relationship between the tree and the window and the paving and the access to that man door. It all seems quite tight. I know you say it's as big as a kitchen, but that's not a technical reference. When I look at the plans, it looks slightly wider than the 5 o'clock mark up there. I mean, the 5-foot mark where it says pool setback. So it looks like it might be 6 or 7 feet, perhaps.
So the between the bay window and the wall and the existing deck, that measurement there is approximately 10 by what is it, 10 by 16 feet.
Okay.
That door technically doesn't need to be there. We're putting it there for just accessibility purposes. The garage has an easement door in the back, but we've decided to put the door there just as an additional egress to the garage.
I'm just trying to eliminate that the future potential of you coming back and saying we had to remove the tree because it was in the way of where we put the garage door.
I can assure you my whole goal is to not disturb the tree. We really want the tree. I'm a big fan of mature landscaping. We really love the tree, and have zero intentions and guarantee that it will not be removed. That is an absolute must that we keep the tree there.
Great.
It's a for us, the design aesthetic to the house, that tree is super appealing. And so it definitely is remaining. We have zero intentions of taking it out. We will not take it out. That is an absolute non-negotiable for us.
Great. And on the record.
Thank you, Member Mill. Any other questions from the applicant? Or yes, yeah.
I just have a comment. I just want to say I really am in favor of you doing the extension of the garage door. I think that is going to really fit with the property well and kind of keep it conforming to what the original plans were. And I appreciate the fact that you did that.
Thank you.
Great.
Ryan, when you do that, what's the configuration of the lanterns on the front of that garage elevation?
Simply put, it's going to look like the original plan had. There's two garage doors. We're going to a single large 2-car garage, well, a single small 2 garage door. There'll be one lantern
garage.
There'll be one lantern on each side of the garage door.
So a single door to a 2-car garage.
Correct.
With 2 lanterns, one on either side.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions about the garage? And before we move on to the pool, which I believe was the amendment question. Okay. Now, Ryan, I know you mentioned the additional attendee wasn't included, isn't here, but is there any additional detail you wanted to provide on the pool and the setbacks associated with that?
I did fulfill the request to get a land survey, which we pursued to do. It's reflective of what's now in this architectural rendering on the pool and from the architect. The fence that is existing there ultimately is the property line as provided in that slide. Daniel, did you upload that picture of the survey to prove that we did that?
Not on the PowerPoint, but I can share that if you'd like. I can find it.
If the board feels it's necessary, we went through it, we paid for it, we got it done. Ultimately, the rumor from the previous owner said that the fence had been encroaching on the property a few inches, if not as a foot. Ultimately, the fence is the line. We had originally drawn the plans to the fence being the property line. So the drawings originally showed that. So at this point, our setback to the pool as well as the garage will be at 5 feet or greater to meet all county and city standards.
Thank you very much. Any questions about that from the members of the board? No questions. I should point out, is there any additional public comment at this time
I think
before we
Sandra had
move?
something.
I have not received any public comment on this item.
There-
And I'm sorry to do this, but I do have a question for the applicant that I hadn't noticed earlier. And that is, why is the garage door not centered on that elevation, which will also throw off light fixtures?
If I heard you right, I could, the volume is quite low. You said, why is the garage door not centered on the egress for the automatic garage door or the man door?
The garage door, it has a greater distance on the north or left side and a smaller distance on the right and south side.
So there really isn't a definitive reason why we did that, other than since we widened the garage door, there is a line of topiary shrubbery that will kind of align with that section. It's not noted in the drawing to be specific. There will be some movement of shrubbery. Other than that, just to try to have it line up with the existing driveway, I felt that this location would really lay out the best, despite the fact still being somewhat grandfathered into the FAR for this, just to accomplish 5-foot setback, even though right now currently it's less than 3 for the garage door, or the garage door existing wall to the outside of the property. We are moving it in, and that way it's better centered actually to the driveway.
Daniel, can you pull that up?
And I also have a clarification. We do have one public comment. I was mixing the items, so I'll do that in a minute.
Daniel, could you, is there a possibility for you to split screen and add the image of the original photograph layout of the garage that you started the presentation with, please? Now, if you could go to image 6, please. Okay, so if you look at the right side of the garage door, you can see how close it is to the existing fence, which is the property line. You can also see the mature tree there. So we're trying to really keep both things in compliance. One is to make sure that the new garage falls within the 5-foot setback of the existing fence, which would require some movement in. But in doing so, when we build the new garage, bringing it forward, that will also allow us not to disturb the existing line of trees that are there by bringing that garage wall in. In doing so, that where the garage door then would sit would be better centered where it is location wise. And as you can see, the reference to the shrubbery there at some point, that's going to terminate. And then that egress will follow into the other side of the courtyard.
The shrubbery gets removed because currently you'd have to jump over it to get to that man door.
Correct.
So that has little impact on the center of the door in that elevation. I'm not sure. So is what you're showing us right now, is that right wall of the garage less than the 5-foot setback?
Where it is currently?
Yeah.
Can you confirm that? I believe that the original measurement of that garage door is about 3 foot 6 inches from 3 foot 5 inches from the fence. Is that correct? From our original plan?
Who are you asking?
Ivan?
Oh,
It is the setback is it's actually 5'0.5" inches. So it is further than the previous garage. The original garage was 3.5 feet from the property line, with maintaining the 5-foot setback to the garage itself. And that same line extends to the water line on the pool itself. So it's a continuous 5-foot essentially setback. And part of the reason for offsetting the garage door is that inside the garage, there is pool equipment, and the left edge or the left side of the garage door more or less aligned with that equipment that's going to go in there. Also, it's more or less a single car garage. It was expanded that perhaps at some future date, there might be a smaller car that might fit in as a second car. It'd be pretty tight, but it's more or less a single car garage with a larger door.
so Ivan, thank you for that explanation. Since the light fixtures, the lanterns, are not shown on this drawing, are we to assume that the margin at the right is the same as what exists there with the current configuration? And will the lanterns be the same distance off of the door on the left and the right?
I would align them with the positioning on the lantern on the right would match the position on the left side.
So the same distance from the edge
of the wall, but it would be centered on the garage door itself. And part of it is on the left side, there is a structure, there's a covered porch area that really obstructs that side of the garage. So it's really not that visible.
But just for clarification, it'll be the same distance off of the door at the left that it is off of the right.
I would say start from the right, work on the left, and then match it on the left side. Same distance from the garage edge door.
Okay.
Okay. There's no other questions. Sandra, did you have the public comment you wanted to share?
And one has come in since we spoke again. So the first one is from Billy Hewitt. It says, thank you to members of the ZDRB for your diligent work. I have just finished reading about Napa's proposal to limit trucking water to rural areas. We, collectively in the Napa Valley, are asking for conservation of water at all levels. I interpret the proposal to mean water shall be used for necessities instead of frivolities. I also understand that Yountville has not put a moratorium on pool building, just that the pool cannot be filled with town water. If trucked-in water is prohibited, does that result in an empty pool? I feel that at this time, approval of a swimming pool is in conflict with the call to conserve water. Thanks for hearing my concerns. Second public comment is from Wolf Breslow, the ZDRB. In case of approval of design review, it would be of interest to know when the project is likely to begin and how long it might last. I would appreciate that somebody ask this question. There are no other comments.
Thank you. I will clarify that my understanding, directed at Sandra and Daniel, is the timeline of the project is not sort of a matter of discussion for the ZDRB, so not sort of within our mandate to ask and inquire about that.
So if approved, the project would have, the entitlement would be good for 2 years, meaning he would have to start construction, obtain a building permit and start construction. And then once obtaining a building permit, he has to call for an inspection within a year period. So it could take a long time if the applicant isn't prepared to move ahead swiftly.
And then to address the previous public comment, for that, I'll assume that is something that the planning department can take forward as a consideration, although it's not, again, within the purview of the ZDRB to make decisions that are currently within the various ordinances.
Correct.
Okay.
We're
would you
currently
like
at a phase 2 water emergency, which puts some, sorry, I see your lips moving, but we don't hear you, Chair Zagorczyk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I freeze? I wasn't saying anything. Sorry.
Okay. I was clarifying that we're in a phase 2 water emergency and it prohibits certain items. So we haven't gone to a moratorium on pools. There's room to move to a phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 4 in the future if this continues. So that could be something under consideration by the town council in the future.
May I make a comment to add to record?
By all means.
Regarding the 2 public questions. One, our first meeting that we had, it had been brought up, I don't recall the gentleman's name, but said that they would prefer and request that we had water shipped in for that. I have since done that research and have put it together. So we will not be filling up with the city water hose for the spigot of our house. Prior to that request, we've planned to have that shipped in as the water concern. Number 2, the scope of time, our contractor is slated to start September 1st, possibly sooner, depending on how fast the demo permit can happen. They figure a month and a half for the first phase of demolition. Our pool contractor then they'll stop. The pool contractor comes in. They're figuring 2 months to accomplish their job. Then the building contractor to build the rest of the garage is figuring 2 to 2.5 months for the rest of the project. Puts us somewhere in between December, January, maybe late February at the most. We certainly would love to have this finished up by spring of next year. That's our goal.
Thank you for sharing that information. Any final questions before we move to motions? Okay. Would anyone like to proceed with a motion at this time? I will go ahead and start. Given the dialogue back and forth, the repeat visit, the town council approval of the tenant parking spot, and the efforts put forward to meet all the various requirements, I this time would put a motion forward to accept the revised designs and plans as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. That's 4 votes in favor, and the motion is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant, Ryan, Ivan. And with that, we'll proceed to agenda item number 2. Obviously, yeah, previous applicants are welcome to sit through that or can choose to leave at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for your hard work and appreciation for hearing us. And thank you for everything that you do to keep the community and the town looking beautiful. We appreciate it just as much, and obviously put our effort through it. So thank you for allowing us to proceed. Have a good week.
Thank you so much. Okay, back to Sandra, Daniel, and now Robert. And welcome back, Amber Cook.
Yes, welcome back. Nice to have before you phase 2, part B of the zoning and design ordinance update. And I'll walk you through the slideshow. Daniel, if you could start that. So today's agenda will start with a staff presentation, and we're going to remind you of the Zoto update process and what we've go through the new proposed structure for the zoning and design ordinances, the zoning ordinance, which is significant compared to the current structure, and then we'll review some of the major changes in all of the chapters that are before you tonight in Part B. The ZDRB will have a chance to ask questions. We will hear from members of the public, checking the, and then final comments and a recommendation from the ZDRB tonight. We'll be looking for a motion and a second, either to approve the recommended changes as presented, or with any changes that have the consensus of the board after tonight's discussion. And we will share the next steps in this process as we work to have the code adopted by the modified to be consistent with that document, and that was reviewed by the ZDRB and later approved by the council. We are now in the phase 2 effort, and Part A you saw before you in June, and it related mostly to the residential districts and related chapters like home occupations, parking, and tree preservation. Tonight you have before you Part B, and the focus is on the commercial districts, the commercial design standards, as well as all of the regulatory chapters and definitions. Next slide. This reminds us of the process, and so the phase 2 hearings for Part A came before the ZDRB on June 8th. We're taking those to the council next Tuesday. And then what is Part B that's being considered by you tonight will go to the council for their consideration on August 3rd. And it is at that August 3rd meeting that we will be presenting the ordinance itself. And so it would be an introduction and first reading of that ordinance if it moves from the ZDRB tonight. The hope is to adopt it at one of the 2 council meetings in September, most likely the 2nd meeting. The Zoto process has been overseen by the ad hoc committee, and that committee is comprised of Mayor Dunbar and Vice Mayor Dorman, as well as ZDRB Vice Chair Miller and Member Cook. And since November of last year, that committee has met on 13 occasions, and they've put in over 30 hours of meeting time in reviewing these. New code will have this new structure because we are consolidating Title 17 and 18 into a single code, and then we're dividing it into separate divisions for ease of use. Division 1 is the applicability of this ordinance, and it includes the zoning of the different land use designations, setting forth the allowable uses and the use permit requirements. Division 2 looks at all the different zoning districts and establishes the allowable uses in each of those zones, as well as the development and design standards. Highlighted here, you see the ones that you'll be looking at today, and they're the Parks and Playfields District, the Public Facilities District, the different commercial districts, as well as the commercial design standards. And then with regards to overlays, we're looking at the Creekside retail and mixed use tonight. Division 3 will have the new general development standards, and these are standards that apply to all parcels in town. They include such things as FAR, height exemptions, setback encroachments, and the commercial development incentives that exist. Division 4 is for standards that for specific land uses and wouldn't apply to all parcels. Include such things as ADUs, home occupations. Finally, Division 5 is in regards to the permit processes and administration. These are all of the administrative chapters, and it discusses each of the different permit types. And lastly, Division 6 will have the definition, and those definitions are in one location now, the ones that we have pulled from each of the individual chapters that we've reviewed in the past, and we've included some new definitions. So at this point, I will turn it over to Bob Brown, and he will walk us through each of the different substantive proposed changes.
Thanks very much, Sandra. Although it seems somewhat trivial to try to summarize 13 meetings here in about 10 minutes, but anyway, we'll do that. It just doesn't seem to give enough credence to all the work that went into creating these. So the first section of the code in Division 1 is mostly legalese. So these are adding in a number of the general provisions of the code, how the code applies. We've added a section on minimum requirements that says basically that the regulations in the code are minimums, and that the decision-making bodies have the ability to require more to make the findings as necessary. And then we also have an inclusion of a section that talks about grandfathering of projects that are applications that are in process in cases where the ordinance has changed. So they're going to be judged upon the old regulations if they're complete. And also a section on the responsibilities of the planning officer. So these are pretty perfunctory, but let me ask if there's any clarifying questions that I can provide. Answers to. No? Okay. Then next slide. So again, this is in Division 1. These are the allowable land uses, and this is a new chapter. Again, a lot of legalese, but essentially sets up the permitted and the conditional uses. It applies development regulations that come later in the code and the permit requirements that are in Division 4. One of the real attributes of the code, I think, will be the summary use table. So we have taken all of the permitted conditional uses, put them in one table, so extracted these from all the different zoning districts. So it will enable staff or property owners or applicants to go to one location if, for example, they want to find out where financial institutions are allowed in the various districts. So I think that will be handy. And then we spent a lot of time looking at the various use categories. They were kind of all over the board. One of the things we did was try to consolidate those down rather than having long lists. So for example, there were more than probably a dozen things that we then classified as personal services. So everything from nail salons to animal grooming to shoe repair. We've defined those now as one use category, so we don't have to repeat those in each of the districts. And we did a lot of updating of the categories and looked across the various zoning districts to create more consistency with the various uses. Questions about that section? Okay, we'll go on. So this is the first of the zoning districts you're looking at tonight. It's a new one. We've previously had parks and playfields listed as a category, a land use category on the general plan land use map and in the zoning map, but there was no specific zoning district for it. So we had some regulations and the development standards in Title 18. We've brought them over and created a district out of it. And one of the things that we've added in was to clarify that the Parks and Recreation Commission has a review function in things that are proposed in parks and playfields. Any questions? Okay, next, Dan. So in 2020, you saw changes to the public facilities, primary commercial, and residential scale commercial districts. We're bringing those back and just tweaking them. We've had some format changes since then, and also, of course, the numbering of the whole code is changing. So we've made some updates, pretty perfunctory though, nothing really substantive. Any questions here? Okay, Dan. Old Town Commercial. We've added a section on site-specific conditions. There are a number of regulations that were in place to protect the historic resources here in this district. So those have been called out per parcel. And due to First Amendment requirements, we had to find a home for a potential adult-oriented business. If there ever is an applicant for one of those, it can't be denied. It has to be available somewhere. And so we propose to add that as an allowed conditional use in the Old Town Commercial District, both because it's a relatively small district and its location is somewhat contained. We've also added restrictions to those, however, which is permissible under the courts. And so, for example, a adult entertainment use would have to be located at least 100 feet from a residential zone. So that pretty much precludes the portion of this district that is on the east side of Washington. And they have to be 500 feet from one another. So given the size of the district, if there ever was a proposal for an adult-oriented use, there would likely only be one, given the size of this district. Any questions about OTC? Okay, Dan, next. The retained commercial district is really all about sort of retaining, as it says, the existing uses and not really allowing substantive or very substantial expansion of existing structures. So it establishes site-specific limits on FARs for the existing parcels on a parcel-by-parcel basis. And there were references and some allowed uses that related to residential. Those have been eliminated because the pre-existing residential component of one of the parcels has been eliminated. It's been replaced by a test kitchen. So a residential use is no longer an acceptable retained use, excuse me, in the RC district. Any questions? Next. Then we have new design standards for non-residential properties and mixed-use projects. Many of these were from Title 18, although they've been expanded and pretty substantially edited by the subcommittee. We've added a design intent section for each of the commercial districts, and those were largely in place in Title 18, but they've been edited and expanded. And again, the intent of these design intent sections is to provide decision makers with some context, some vision for which each of the districts are trying to achieve from a design standpoint. We'll remind you, as with the residential standards you saw at the last meeting, these design standards can be waived through design review. So while they're hard and fast standards, again, there is an alternative route with discretionary design review to convince you that there are some better solutions design-wise. And again, we have a structure for these. We've tried to address building scale and massing. We have criteria for street frontages, for the exterior building materials, for parking and driveways, for landscaping, and for utilities and auxiliary structures. And in many cases, particularly regarding utilities and auxiliary structures, these criteria are pretty similar to the residential standards. Questions about the design standards? Okay, Dan. We have a number of development incentives, either FAR increases or potential setback reductions for different types of commercial situations. So for example, for new professional office space that's created, and also for, in some limited situations, expanding existing commercial buildings. And so those have been consolidated from locations in Title 18, and we've created the new chapter. So those are easy to find in the code now. Any questions? Next. Okay, so again, most of the bulk of what you reviewed in your packet have to do with the regulatory chapters. And so there's 14 of these that look at the various application types. So next slide. The first of these really sort of sets up the procedural requirements for applications and hearings. We've added a provision saying that if there are multiple applications involved in a project, that they need to be processed concurrently, and that if there are different decision makers for those, then it automatically shifts to the highest level decision-making body. We have requirements for on-site commercial notification signage for new applications in addition to the mailed notice. Those were on a separate spec sheet, and so we've incorporated those in the code so they're easy to find. And we've also added another table here, another summary table about the review authority. So it summarizes who makes decisions and who makes recommendations on each of the application types. And this was a process then that allowed us with the subcommittee to go back and clarify the authority that the ZDRB has as a final decision maker, and also look for some consistency in terms of review authority across the application types. So Dan, if you could go to the next slide. This is probably going to be way too small to read, but I've tried to highlight the application types where it is now clear that the ZDRB has the final decision-making authority. And so those include many of the sign types, particularly freestanding signs or internally illuminated signs or signs along Highway 29. So these are the more significant sign applications. The other sign, lower types of signs would be reviewed by staff. In terms of design review, we had a lot of discussion about the level of project design review that the ZDRB should have final decision-making authority on. And the agreement of the subcommittee was that for residential projects of 4 or fewer units or 4 or fewer lots, the ZDRB would be the final decision-making body, except if that decision was appealed up to the town council. And then for variances and exceptions, both of those would be final at the ZDRB level. So again, this table should be a helpful summary for staff and applicants. And let me ask if the board has any questions about this.
I did have a question going back a little bit on the FAR incentives on commercial space. Sorry, I've been background processing that. I know that the various sort of height limits, especially in commercial property in the central core, as it were, has been more of the contentious topics amongst Yountville citizens. So I was curious, were the FAR incentives modified substantially around that? I was just curious. I didn't really see anything in the documentation, so I didn't know if I missed it.
No, so we made those changes as part of phase 1 to allow that third floor incentive for properties on the west side of Washington. The changes that you see tonight are mainly relocated from the design ordinance without change.
Oh, I see. Got it. As part of the reorg of information. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so these incentives are specifically setbacks and FAR. So Sandra's correct. The height provisions and incentives are built into those specific zoning districts because they aren't generally applicable throughout the town.
Understood. And the FAR and setback incentives are all consolidated in phase one, then it sounds like, or are they separately addressed in phase two?
Yes, the FAR and setback exceptions or incentives, excuse me, are part of this phase two.
Got it. Okay.
And they exist currently in the code. I don't think those were changed at all.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Yeah, for some reason I conflated FAR with height. I realized they're separate. Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, we're getting through most of these fairly quickly. The chapter on amendments to zoning, we've added general plan because that was not previously addressed. And we've also clarified that these amendments are either map changes or they could be text amendments as well. So a little more comprehensive. Next. Design review. So a number of changes here. We've structured this more formally now so that there is a major and a minor design review process identified and the types of projects that would be reviewed under either, and that was just summarized in that decision-making table you saw. But this sets up the ability of the ZDRB then legally to be the decision-making body on these minor project types. We have expanded the list of building modifications that can be exempt from design review. A lot of discussion on that, what staff can review. And then we've added provisions for the planning officer to require story poles be installed in situations where there's a real need to help the public and decision makers envision the mass or height or location of a new building proposed. And that allows the planning officer to not only require the installation of the story poles, but also to require certification of those by an outside expert that they're accurately placed. We've changed the expiration date of design review. I think Sandra just mentioned that in the prior application. So that will be 2 years from the date of approval. And the subcommittee took a major pen to rewriting the design review findings. So those are largely new and significantly edited. Questions here? Okay, next application is master development plans. A few changes in terms of the process. We've made conceptual review an optional process for applicants, not mandated. And again, this is the opportunity for an applicant to go before the town council with a pretty conceptual level of information on a project to get sort of an early understanding of the council's position. But it's non-mandatory, it's non-binding. Again, it's just at the applicant's discretion to see if the council seems attuned to the concepts that they have in mind. The planning officer is specifically given authority to approve minor modifications to approved master development plans in certain limited. Here, the urban expiration date is set at 5 years. These are often larger projects or frequently phased projects, so there's more time here. And again, we did a major rewrite of the findings, mostly eliminated the findings because, and then cite the necessity to make findings for both use permits and design reviews, since those are also required. Questions? Next, I think our administrative use permits. This is new. It is a lower level use permit that can be decided at the staff level. And so these specifically deal with reviewing permitted office uses in the OTC, the Old Town Commercial District, and also reviewing moderate home occupations. And this is a ministerial permit. So again, there's no discretion involved. Staff is reviewing compliance of the proposal against the regulations that are in the code. And because of that, there is no advance notice and there's no public hearing involved. But after the planning officer makes a decision, that written decision is noticed to property owners within 300 feet. and there's a 10-day appeal period that commences. Questions? Okay, next will be use permits. Not a lot of changes here. The planning officer is given authority to approve minor changes to commercial uses that are consistent with an approved master development permit. And the ZDRB is given authority to approve residential use permits. And here again, use permit findings were scattered all over the code in the various zoning districts. So they've all been consolidated and edited to be a consistent mix. Questions? Next are exceptions. And so we've clarified that exceptions can be granted by the ZDRB, and specifically for two things. One are changes to the auxiliary residential structures, the setbacks, et cetera. And then also the ability to grant an exception to the 50% limit on two-story homes on a block face. Any questions here? Next. Definitions. So, as you can see from your packet, definitions is now huge. They were all over the code, literally. We've updated them in terms of any legal changes that have been made. And we've also added a lot of new definitions for terms that weren't previously defined. So I think this is a really comprehensive list of definitions. I'm sure you all have many, many questions about the various definitions. No, okay, next. While we've been tweaking and modifying titles 17 and 18, we've also then have had to touch a few of the other titles minimally in the municipal code. So Title 18 had some street design standards, widths, et cetera, of the streets, the sidewalks, planting strips, et cetera. So we've relocated those out of Title 18 since we're terminating Title 18. And those have been shifted now to Title 12, which is much more appropriate. This is where the streets, sidewalks, public places, and parks regulations are found in the code. Next. And we have currently a provision in, I believe it's Title 17, for the granting of use and occupancy permits. And these typically occur after the construction of a project to make sure that it's ready for occupancy. What was in the code really was not compliant with the way staff has been processing these for a number of years. And so what we've done is we've taken them from Title 17 and we relocated them into Title 15, which is the buildings and construction title. And these are required upon the completion for new commercial construction and changes of use. Questions there? Again, this is really a staff function. Next. And subdivisions to accommodate the officially the ZDRB's review of subdivision maps and parcel maps. This wasn't previously referenced in Title 16, the subdivision regulations, and so we've added those back in with the assistance of the Public Works Director. And next, Dan. And that's it. That's a summary of the major changes, and we'd be happy to now to hear public comment. And if you have any proposed changes or additional questions regarding any of the specific chapters that we have before you tonight, we'd love to hear those.
Right, turning to Sandra, if there's any public comments. Don't anticipate any.
No, not received any public comment on this item on the agenda.
Thank you. With that, I will turn it to members of the board, likely those that did not directly participate, to see if there was any feedback on any specific item that they didn't bring up earlier, or questions. I guess, addressed it to their fellow members who, alongside Robert, worked on this. Yes.
I don't have any questions, but my feedback is definitely a huge thank you to Stephen and Kim and for the staff and you, Robert, for all this time spent. I mean, I know this is going to be so much easier to use going forward than the previous was, and I know it was a huge commitment for you all, and so kudos for doing this for us.
Thank you, Lynn. Sandra mentioned the number of meetings and the number of hours that the Zoto subcommittee put in, but it was nothing, I'm sure, compared to the work Sandra and Bob put in. They spent so much time deciding what needed to be done and getting it done, and they brought such a clarity to us each meeting, what we needed to do and what we needed to talk about and how. So I think it has been thoroughly discussed front to back by the subcommittee, and I think it's a really great improvement overall.
I would add that I think that the work that's being presented here is going to make it not only a lot more efficient for the review by zoning and design and by the council, but also by design professionals. I think the document that we have before us is something that is going to make it a lot clearer to applicants and professionals that are working with them.
Very true.
I certainly echo the comments of my fellow members. It looks just like a complete, we'll call it modernization of the guidelines to let literally the next generation of residents and builders in town benefit from. I was curious, more just a question, as you went through this particular phase of work, what area you felt was sort of the most notably addressed? It seems like there was a long tail of calibrations which added up to a mountain of work, but was there any one or two areas that you felt was a real significant shift to your recollection that that sort of stood out from the rest?
Who are you speaking to?
A question for anyone who gets the answer first. I'm mainly curious because I wouldn't want to let some of the bigger decision or elements get lost amongst the long list of modifications. I was just curious if there was anything to highlight amongst the work.
Well, I think we looked at where there were omissions in the code and we filled those in. One was in the design review process and who touched what. We really cleaned that up. We added the administrative use permits. We clarified that the general plan amendments. And so just bringing a lot of clarity to the whole process and who touches what and how it's done. I think that's a really big improvement. I think the consolidation of the commercial design standards in the zoning ordinance and just the expansion of what we're looking at and what's important in terms of design, we really spelled that out and tried to fill in any gaps that we had. So those are things that stand out most to me. It'll make it a lot easier to use the code, most certainly.
The only thing that I would add is I think this code adoption will be a gigantic gift to Sandra's successor.
Yes, thank you, Sandra.
I was just thinking that. We need to get your name somewhere woven in there, like a list and protocol or something that that lives on. There's still room. You can make that part of the motion. Okay. Any other final thoughts or questions on the opus that was this process?
Well, I wanted to say that the reorganization resulted in a tightening up of a lot of information, which I really appreciate. Going through the code, sometimes there were some areas that were maybe a little vague, but it seems as though that's changed dramatically. And I think that's a great thing. I really appreciate that.
And I would add that one of the things that I've observed in my relatively short time on the board is the continued adaptation and evolution of process itself. There's no formula for how to solve problems. It's balancing sort of tradition and legacy versus putting the right people in a position to make progress. And I know that in some of the earlier instances, attempts were made to combine sort of the ZDRB process with execution. And I think we all have a very open dialogue. I would say unfiltered feedback at times with where things are coming from to the greater good, I believe. And adaptation ensued, and work sessions and planning, and this further optimization resulted with a document that really works. So to me, it's very simple. It's not the document itself, but it was the way in which this came together. The Zodo group was a direct manifestation from that, and those are I think some of the bigger lessons that I hope we can carry forward.
Very true.
So with that, we'll move on to see if anyone would like to make a motion to adopt.
I'll make a motion.
Just clarify before you get started.
Yeah.
The council will be the adopting body, so it would be a recommendation to approve as presented or with any changes.
Thank you. So a motion to recommend approving as presented so that it can be adopted by the council.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5 ayes, the motion passes. Thank you very much. And
High fives.
yes, virtual high fives in person next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. And with that culmination of the meeting, does anyone want to make a motion? Oh, yes.
Well, let me make an announcement first. This will be our last Zoom meeting. When we meet in August, it will be in person. And
Yay.
we will have a new board. Lynn, we won't miss having you with us. You've been such a great addition to this board, and you've brought a lot of thoughtful comments. So we wish you well, and yet in August, we'll have a new member in person.
And it's almost appropriate that your thank you was muted in a sense, because as much as I valued the flexibility, no more in-person muting. Although I think in council,
Yes.
maybe somebody will start talking without any sound just to mess with us moving forward.
Probably.
Be like,
Right.
yes, yeah. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. It's been a real process to go through the general plan and then finish up with 3 years of this, to see the general plan be put into place, or to try to put the general plan into place, I should say. So thank you. And then I also want to thank staff and you in particular, Sandra, who have been so good about guiding us through things, and the patience that you extended at times that I know was trying. So I appreciate it, and I know we appreciate it as a group as well.
Very well said.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, with those positive and encouraging thoughts, anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I so move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Thank
Aye.
you, everyone. A wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Night.